I'm really trying, guys. It is officially March, and that means we are less than a month away from the release of Batman vs. Superman, a movie that I'm sure is going to make a lot of money. But here's the weird thing. Everybody's really excited that Batman is going to be in it. Everyone seems to forget that this is not only going to also be a Superman movie, but it's a sequel to a Superman movie. I'm seeing a lot of think pieces online about comics you should be reading to gear up for this movie, and they all feature Batman predominantly, either that or their crossover books. And if they do recommend Superman books, it's all the usual stuff. All-Star Superman, Whatever Happened to Truth, Justice, and the American Way, all the various origin stories, the 2 Alan Moore stories, or their Elseworld stories like Speeding Bullets and Kingdom Come, stories that expand on the idea of Superman, but not the character of Superman. So I decided to put together a list of some Superman comics you either forgot about or didn't even know existed, but you should definitely pick them up. These are my top 5 underrated Superman stories. Only real rule, this has to be an in-universe solo Superman story, not an Elseworlds tale and not a crossover team-up book. I'm talking solo Superman runs, either Action Comics, Superman, Adventures of Superman, Man of Steel, something like that. And it has to be in DC Universe continuity. With that out of the way, let's begin. I'm not Bob, so I'm sorry, but you're not getting flashy graphics this time. Number 5. Superman's origin gets revisited a lot. Since 1986, there have been 4 in-universe retellings of his origin, and that's not including out-of-continuity stories like Earth 1 and American Alien. But that's not to say that this era in Superman's life is no longer interesting. A good writer and artist team can find new and interesting topics to talk about. One of these teams is Darwyn Cooke and Tim Sale, whose 2007 story Kryptonite from the Superman Confidential line is all about the Man of Steel's first encounter with the substance. It's not often you see Darwyn Cooke writing a book he isn't drawing, but this is a perfect example that he's a really damn good writer. The way he portrays Superman trying to figure out his place in the world never feels overly mopey or sullen. It always feels genuine and earnest, and you sympathize with the guy throughout. And Tim Sale's artwork is always top-notch. It helps complement Darwyn Cooke's writing perfectly, and it helps it stand out from other Superman titles, even Tim Sale's own Superman for All Seasons. It's a shame that Superman Confidential only lasted 14 issues. There were other stories in this line and they were all pretty good, but none of them can match Kryptonite. There is a reason why this is the only arc from that series that has been collected in trade. Number 4. This is a story I remember being a big deal when it came out in 2004. I always felt that this was Superman's answer to the Batman story Hush, in that it was a story in which top talent with real indie cred was being given the keys to one of the biggest superhero properties in all of comics. And while it's not as well remembered as Hush is, and we'll get to that in a minute, trust me when I say Godfall is certainly worth reading. It was basically DC giving Michael Turner and his team at Aspen Comics the rights to do Superman for a couple months, and they even threw in writer Joe Kelly for good measure. The Aspen influences are definitely there. Artist Talent Caldwell is definitely keeping in the Aspen Michael Turner art style, but it never feels like a rehash or a tracing of Michael Turner. The art feels fresh and uniquely his own. The story by Turner and Kelly reintroduces the idea of the city of Kandor from the old 60s comics and reintroduces Lila Laurel for a new generation. It's definitely a more sci-fi take on the character than you may be used to, but that's a good thing. We need more takes like that on Superman. He is an alien after all. Now, I must admit that this is not a perfect story in any stretch of the word. It can be confusing at times, and as good as an artist as Talent Caldwell is, his art can be a little hard to follow. Also, this story is kind of steeped in what was going on in Superman books at the time, so you're definitely going to want to read the introduction in this trade to know what's going on. And this trade may be the only way to read this. At the time of this recording, only 2 issues from this story are on Comixology, so you might want to have to hunt down the physical copy for this until they put all the rest of the issues up. Those are the reasons why I think it might not be as fondly remembered as Hush is, but still, it's definitely worth checking out. This is definitely a good story, and it's nice to sometimes look back and see where Superman was in the early 2000s. It wasn't that bad of a place. Number 3. Okay, this one is kind of a cheat, in that Superman isn't the main character. He's not even in it until the last issue. But this was told in Action Comics, and his presence is felt throughout. And this is one of the most unique and interesting stories in modern comics that I would be doing such a disservice if I didn't recommend The Black Ring by Paul Cornell and Pete Woods. See, this story took place when Superman was walking across the country in the Grounded storyline. And it's actually about Lex Luthor trying to unlock the mysteries of how the Black Lantern Ring works. It's one of the best depictions of Lex Luthor in any medium. It really shows you just how smart, cunning, ruthless, jealous, and downright nasty he can be. It can also get into some pretty dark territory too, particularly with one of Luthor's robot assistants, which I will not spoil for you because you have got to see it to believe it. But the Black Ring is most fascinating because it shows you just how far Lex will go to get what he wants. It's a shame that the last chapter of the story was rushed to make way for the reign of the Doomsday story DC was planning, but either way, you're not going to read a comic like this anytime soon. Definitely check this out. Number 2. Whenever people want to start reading Superman, I always tell them to read something by Geoff Johns, and not just because he's one of the best writers in the industry. His Superman stories are almost always very easy to pick up and read. Even a continuity-heavy story like Superman and the Legion of Superheroes never feels like a slog because of all the backstory. It's always very breezy to read. People always mention the Legion story or Secret Origins or Last Son or Brainiac as the best Geoff Johns Superman stories, but everyone seems to forget about Escape from Bizarro World, which he co-wrote with his mentor and director of Superman the movie, Richard Donner. In this story, Bizarro attempts to build a new world in his own image, and he kidnaps Paul Kent because if Superman has a father, then it stands to reason that Bizarro needs a father, right? All the heart and warmth that you remember from Donner's Superman movie is in this book, more so than his other collaboration with Geoff Johns' Last Son. The relationship between Superman and his Earth parents is rendered so realistically here that it makes what happens later in Johns' run that much more heartbreaking. But the real MVP of this story is artist Eric Powell. He's best known for his creator-owned series The Goon, one of the best indie titles of all time. His art is very rough and square and honestly kind of ugly, so it's perfect for rendering Bizarro World in the right image. No one else could have done it the way Eric Powell does it. But that's not to say he can't draw regular people well. In fact, his Superman is the pitch-perfect contrast for everything that's going on in Bizarro World. A perfect specimen of a man trapped in a very imperfect world. It was only a 3-issue story, but it's one that should not be forgotten. This is definitely the hidden gem of all of Geoff Johns' Superman tales. Number 1. Geoff Johns started his run on Action during the 1 year later era of DC Comics after Infinite Crisis. At the same time, writer Kurt Busiek was handling the writing duties on the main Superman title. And while the Geoff Johns work seems to get more recognition, it would be completely unfair to disregard Busiek's work, especially Camelot Falls, which he did with artist Carlos Pacheco. The story takes place right after Superman returns from a 1-year absence, and not only is he trying to get back into the swing of his dual life, but now he has to contend with a monster of mysterious origin and an Atlantean who wants him to stop being Superman because he thinks it's doing more harm to the human race than good. This may sound like a basic Superman story, but trust me when I say it's one that's fun and exciting and fresh every time you read it. And that's not to say that there's nothing new here. The idea of whether or not Superman is good for society is handled in a very fun, interesting new ways throughout the series. And the character of Subject 17 may just be what Doomsday should have been, a vicious monster with a lot more going on under the surface than we realize. Now, Camelot Falls was split amongst 2 trades, Trade 1 and Trade 2, and I don't know if they ever did a combined version with both stories. But that being said, you can usually find both of them for 2 for 1, and I can't recommend this enough. This is one of the most underappreciated Superman stories of the last 10 years. Definitely check it out. So there you have it, my top 5 underrated Superman stories. Let me know yours down below or anywhere on the internet. I know I'm leaving off some things like New Krypton or Gail Simone's issues of Action Comics. Let me know what you thought of those if you've read them. And as always, like if you like, subscribe if you really like, share this video with a friend. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time. Instead, what I'm going to do is recommend 5 lesser-known books that don't typically appear on all of these lists. These are all books that tell great and compelling stories and explore the Batman from different angles, and in my opinion deserve to be spoken in the same breath as all the other great Batman books, if not more so. And he's not wrong. Publishers do put out a lot of stuff tugging on our nostalgia, and not just Marvel and DC, but even the smaller publishers like Dark Horse and IDW. Image has been really good about just letting creators create and do their own thing, and it's been showing in their sales.